Have you noticed that there are a lot of mini presses on the market these days? In today's video, I'm going to compare three. In the video, I'm going to be using the Cricut mini press, the xTool mini press, and the newest HTVRONT mini press. I'm going to look at several things. I'm going to look at things like how long do they take to heat up? How hot do they get? What's the pressing size of each press? We'll look at some other features as well. After we do that, we're going to actually use one of these presses and we're going to make a sublimation keychain. The first thing that I want to do is turn each of these on and see how long it takes for them to get up to temperature. Once they get up to temperature, I'm going to measure their heat with this infrared thermometer. Now, if you do anything with heat presses, you probably ought to have one of these. This helps you check the temperature of the various heat presses in your craft room, whether it's a flat heat press, a tumbler heat press, so on and so forth. Now, each of these mini presses has three temperature settings: low, medium, and high. With the HTVRONT, once it's plugged in, you're going to get a green light here. Once we turn it on, that'll turn red, and then when it's up to temperature, it turns back to green. To turn it on, you have this little wheel on the side. Currently it says off, so I'm just going to drag this until it's on high. Now let's go ahead and start. Okay, it looked like that got up to temperature at about 1 minute and 54 seconds. Now let's check the temperature. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. Let me turn this on. And it's at 69.6. We'll aim it right here. And that's giving me a reading of 332.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Not as hot as it should be. Not hot enough to do sublimation. We'll check it again in a couple minutes. Next, we'll turn on the Cricut. The Cricut also has three different temperature settings: low, medium, and high, and you turn it on right here. So I'm going to press it 3 times to get it all the way on high, and then we'll press start. So the Cricut mini press took about 1 minute and 49 seconds. Let's go ahead and take a temperature reading on it. All right, it is now at 69.8. And that read 360.9. We'll check it again in a little bit as well. The last press is the xTool. It turns on just like the Cricut does. There's a button right here. You push it 3 times to get it to high. When it comes on, it's going to be an orange color. When it gets up to temp, it'll turn green. And then this press, the xTool press, took about 2 minutes 27 seconds. And really, that's what I would expect. It is the largest press, so I would expect it to take longer than the other two. Now let's go back and take another reading for each of these and see if they maintain their heat. We did the HTVRONT one first, so let's start with it. Let me go ahead and get this back down to a regular temperature. It is 70.5. And 277 degrees. So it has really fallen. Now the light's still green. When I was working with these, I did see that it went to red, which means that the heating element basically turned back on, then it got back up to green. It's just not holding the temperature the way that you would really want one to. Now who knows, maybe I got a little bit of a defective unit. I'll try to get a hold of HTVRONT and see what they say. All right, let's see if the Cricut one is maintaining its heat. Okay, 70.3. And that's a reading of 368.2. So that did better. And then the xTool, let's get this back to normal, and we'll see how it did. and that's a reading of 359.8. Now this one didn't have as long to cool off, so I am going to wait a couple more minutes, then I'll take another reading of it because I don't think that was a fair comparison since the other two had more time to cool off, so to speak. All right, it's been a couple more minutes, so let's check this again. It's at 72.3. And that is at 358.3. So that one's holding pretty well too. The Cricut and the xTool held really well. Let's check this one more time. Now it's on green, so it should be up to temperature. And it is 289.6. So that looks like it's on the climb back up. Now one thing that's important to me is whether the press has an auto shut off. So I'm going to leave all three presses on for now and see which ones do. Next, let's look at the pressing size of each of these. I have the size of the Cricut here, the xTool here, and the HTVRONT here. So what I did is I put each press down on the paper. I drew around it with an ink pen. So you are going to have a little bit larger space because you have the width of the head of the ink pen. So these measurements are approximations, but they're relatively close. So here is the pressing area of the Cricut press. This press at its widest measured about 2 inches across, and at its tallest it measured about 3¼ inches. The press that you see here is the xTool press. It is the largest press. At its widest, it's about 2.5 inches. Then it was 4 inches plus just a little bit tall. I also like that it stays fairly wide for quite a while. Now let's take a look at HTVRONT's newest mini press. Here's the bottom of it, and it does look like I got something on it. So far I have only used this to press fabric, but there's a little discoloration there. So at its widest, it's about 2¼ inches wide, and then the height is almost 3¾ inches. I also like the shape of it because it stays wide for longer than what the Cricut does. Now all three of these come with a silicone, I think it's silicone base to protect your table. The handles are a little bit different. This is what the Cricut handle looks like. This is what the xTool handle looks like, and that's similar to what the HTVRONT handle looks like. The handle on all three of these is perfectly fine for me. This is probably less important, but I also noticed when I was plugging all three of these in, the cord for the xTool was a little bit longer. In fact, it was about 1 foot longer. Now let's check out the prices of the mini presses. I see the HTVRONT one right here. It is the H1 mini heat press, and you can see right now it's $24.99, but with a coupon it's $22.99. At this price, it's the least expensive of the heat presses that I use. You can also get it directly from HTVRONT's website, and I do have a coupon that's good until I think it's January 2nd. I'll put the Amazon link as well as the direct link in the video description. Now this H1 comes in pink. It comes in lavender, and on their website they also had it in a light blue. If you start getting over to these that have 2 colors on them, notice that the H1 designation goes away. Now I'm not sure what H1 gets you that these don't, so do your research. Now let's check out the price of the Cricut mini press. I can see one in blue, I see one in red, and they are $39. Let's just click on this one and see what we see. Okay, it does come in 2 options. It comes in the red and it comes in the blue. At $39, it is more than the HTVRONT press, but it's less than the xTool press. So lastly, let's check out this xTool press. It comes in at $43.99 if you get it just as a single unit, but it does have a kit. Now I don't use it as a kit, but if you buy the kit, you also get this little controller where you can control the temperature as well as the time. That's a nice feature, but to me that's a luxury that I just don't need. Now the Cricut said it had an auto shut off. It is still on, so I'm going to set it to the side while we make a keychain. And the same with the HTVRONT. Now I did check its auto shut off and it worked. I've also checked the xTools and it worked. I just didn't remember if Cricut had one, but the literature says it does. Okay, that beeped several times and then it went off. So that's how you know when it's auto shutting off. Let's go ahead and turn it back on. And we're going to turn it on high so we can do this keychain. So for my keychain, I'm just using a sublimation blank that I got off of Amazon. I've already removed the protective film on this side, and I did want to show you it does have protective film on this side. Most of the hard surface sublimation blanks do, so always be sure and check for that. I'm going to put some paper under it to protect my wool pressing mat. And then with this type of blank, you do have to mirror your design. So this is a little keychain design, and I used an image that I got off of Creative Fabrica, and I just added an M to it. Okay, let's go ahead and put it on. I made my design larger than what it needed to be so that I could see it outside my keychain. If you accidentally make your design a little too small, you can end up with a little white ring around the outside of your keychain or whatever blank you're using. So I like to make my designs a little larger than what they need to be. So let's go ahead and turn this over. And I have 2 pieces of paper to protect my wool pressing mat. Now one thing I'm thinking is I probably should have cut it down a little bit more so I could see exactly where it is, but I think I'll be fine. Now if you don't buy that controller with this, you don't have a timer on it. That's pretty typical for many heat presses. So I'm just going to use the lady in the box. All right, let me hold on to my paper so it doesn't shift while I take this off. And then I'm going to let that cool down just for a minute. Now, do you need a mini press to do sublimation keychains and sublimation earrings? No, you can do those on your regular press. One thing about the little mini press is it heats up really quickly. I can just sit at my desk and do everything that I want to do. And what I really love my mini presses for is when I'm sewing. So when I'm sewing on real small projects like little mini zipper pouches, things like that, I love to use a mini press to press the seams. All right, let's see how this did. Oh, that's cute. So pretty. Now I cut off a little bit of the top of my M, but that's perfectly fine. That's really cute. Okay, that has cooled down enough, so let's go ahead and do the other side. If you wanted to leave this just one-sided, you could, but I want mine to be two-sided. So I'm going to push it up a little bit so that this time I'm not eating into my M. Now notice with that extra ink, you have to have something to catch that extra ink. If I didn't have paper under this, this would land on my wool pressing mat. So use something under it, but then don't set this back down on that because that's ink. It could transfer back to this. So while that's cooling off, if I look back at my measurements, the widest area of the Cricut is 2 inches, so that'd be pretty tough. The widest area of this is 2 1/4. I think that would be fine if my heat were working correctly, but I love the larger size of the xTool mini press. Now let's go ahead and look at our earring, and then I'll get the hardware on. Very cute. Now you do see slight impressions where the tape was. Here's how the keychain turned out, but the keychain wasn't really the focus of this video. I made this video to show how the different mini heat presses can have really significant differences. In the end, whatever mini heat press you decide to buy, I think the most important thing is to try it out and make sure it suits your needs.